Okay, so now knight to d5 by Erdoğmuş. He centralizes the knight on d5, and interestingly, this is the line that was trained to him by Shakhriyar Mamediyarov. Instead of following the usual d3 line, he deliberately deviates, and now he's basically inviting a knight exchange. And Gukesh simply accepts that. E takes d5, attacking the knight, so that's why. And you can see here Gukesh counters with e4 and at the same time gains more space since this knight is attacked, so that's why. And after that, Gukesh also centralizes the knight as well as he is also threatening the bishop, so that's why. And after all of this, you can see white gets this open a file, but it also creates this double pawn structure. And now Gukesh finds the best move c6, opening the diagonal for this queen. And let's suppose if white tries to improve his pawn structure by capturing on c6, that will be a slight inaccuracy because after takes, d takes c6 and instead of recapturing, which creates an isolated pawn, here black can go for the move a5. If white tries to attack this bishop by, let's suppose, c3, bishop to d6, and if c takes b7, bishop takes b7, and you can see black will ends up with these powerful sniper bishops which are eyeing on the king side. And let's suppose if white tries to attack the e4 pawn, simply rook to e8. And let's suppose if white tries to take the center by, let's suppose, d4, that will be a mistake because of bishop to a6. And you can see now to defend this rook, the only move is to sack the knight by knight to d3, which will be really bad because after takes, rook to e1, and you can see now this dark square bishop sits permanently on the d3 square, restricting the important diagonals where white can't go. And you can see black is winning. But after the move c6, okay, so let me go back. Yup, so after this move, here Erdoğmuş goes for Okay, so after queen to c7, you can see black is now going to play bishop to c4, which attacks the queen, because after queen takes bishop, black can sacrifice the bishop by bishop takes f2 check, and by this white would have to lose the queen. So to stop this all, Erdoğmuş goes for bishop to e3. Okay guys, now in this position, Chess Engine is recommending the move Queen to b6, because after Queen takes b6, A takes b6, and if White decides to exchange the rooks, and if you think White is better due to these double pawn structure of Black, but guys, it's not so easy. I mean, if let's suppose Knight to b4, if he targets the d5 pawn, Black will simply first of all capture, and obviously White cannot capture on e4 due to this back rank threat. So that's why firstly he will go for h4, and if rook to e8, now knight to d5, attacking this pawn, but f5. Basically Black can also start pushing his kingside pawns. If knight takes b6, now Black can also bring the king into the game, and at the end you can see Black will end up with this solid pawn structure supported by the king as well as the rook. This bishop on b5 is also eyeing on this important diagonal, and you can see it's not so easy for White to stop the attack. Okay, so in the actual game, after queen to c5, he simply declines the exchange and goes for queen d7. Okay, so now bishop to a4, covering the d1 square so that White can't enter. And now queen to a5. Basically White creates excess pressure over the bishop, so that's why bishop to b3, attacking the pawn. Okay, so basically instead of bishop takes c4, it's better for Black to go for the move which is rook at a goes to c8, because creating some pressure over the pawn, because after queen takes a7, and obviously Black can't capture on c4 due to the threat of knight to b6. So that's why the best move for Black is now to go for queen to d8, covering the square. And if queen takes b7, bishop takes c4, attacking the bishop, and obviously this bishop can't go to b6 due to the threat of rook to b8, so that's why knight to f4, and after that rook to b8, we can attack the queen. And let's suppose if this queen attacks our bishop, we will simply go for rook to c8. We can attack this queen again, queen to b7, queen to d4, and you can see what's coming next. And let's suppose if white decides to exchange to attack the queen, simply queen to e5, attacking the knight, and you can see black will ends up with a passer on the e file. Okay, so in the actual game, after bishop takes c4, basically he goes for knight to b6, and obviously you can't take due to this threat. And you can see this back rank mate. And as I already said that black can't capture, and guys, now comes the most interesting part of this game. Here Gukesh goes for bishop to a6. He basically tries to trap the queen, because let's suppose if white goes for queen to a7, black will now go for queen to b5, defending the b6 pawn so that white can't escape. And you can see now this white queen is trapped in a jail. So that's why after bishop to a6, let me go back. Here Erdoğmuş panics and he goes for rook takes a6. But guys, that's not the correct move. The correct move for white is to go for rook at a goes to d1, counter-attacking the black queen. And basically this is the move which both players missed. And now there are many ways to continue this game. Let's suppose if black goes for queen to e7, but now comes this beautiful move, queen takes e8 check. The spectacular queen sacrifice, because after queen takes e8, and now just pause the video and try to find the next move which white can play in this position. And yes, I know that's easy, rook takes e4. If queen takes e4, then simply rook to d8 check, queen to e8, and finally rook takes e8 will be a checkmate. Okay, so in the actual game, after rook takes a6, and you can see, yes, white protected his queen, but after all of this, you can see white is now even worse. Okay, so queen to d4, Gukesh centralizes the queen and targeting the pawn. And now to stop any, so basically queen to b3, and now to stop any back rank mate, he simply goes for g6. And now we have reached in a position where black has a passer on the b file, and let's see how Gukesh converts this into a win. Here we can consider the move rook to c5. Here he can consider the move rook to c5 so that he can attack the c3 pawn, but he just goes back to e6, which is not so precise, but it's also winning. And now king to f1, f5. Now Gukesh start pushing these kingside pawns, and for white it's now better to go for rook to b1 so that he can target this pawn, and basically now if white goes there, then you can see now it's not so easy for black to move this rook, but instead he goes for f3, which creates more weakness. King to f7, Gukesh brings the king back into the game, and now white simply exchanges the pawn, rook takes e4, and now obviously black cannot exchange the rooks. Why I am saying this? Because after rook takes e4, f takes e4, and let's suppose if he hopes that he can capture on e4 so that he can equalize the game, that would be the biggest mistake of his life. Because let's suppose if king to e2, king to e6, king to e3 attacking the pawn, but simply king to d5, h4, b5, g4, king to c4, and if white captured on e5, then black will simply take on c3 first, and you can see now no one can stop this b pawn from promotion. And let's suppose if king to d2, this is also not going to work because of this check, trying to deflect the king so that black can promote with the same idea of king takes pawn and then push, push, push. So, and let's suppose if king to e2, simply king takes c3 and again the same threat. So that's why after rook takes e4, Erdoğmuş simply declines the exchange and he simply slides the rook to b1. And now for white, it's better to go for king to e3 so that he can get closer to the pawn, but instead he goes for king to f3. He basically wants to support the pawns, but he forgets the move king to c7, defending the b6 pawn, and now black is ready to capture on c4. So to defend this, rook to b4. But Gukesh simply goes for rook to d6, preparing for king to c6 and then to c5 so that he can create some attack over the pawn. And now rook to a4. He's basically preparing for the check, but Gukesh simply goes further, rook to a8, and instead guys, the move rook to a7 might be the better option so that he can create some attack over the pawn. And now king to c5. And now it's better to defend the pawn, but rook to a7. And as I already said that white obviously can't exchange the rooks, so that's why he just slides the rook to d7. Now simply black captures on c4. And in this position, the final move by Gukesh is king to e5, and here Yağız Kaan Erdoğmuş resigned, because you can see now no one can stop this b pawn from promotion, which is supported by the rook as well as the king. What a game guys, but honestly he played really well against the world champion, and don't forget he's just 14 years old. Like this video and I will see you in the next one. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.